And I had another one, but you've already kind of answered this, which was what are the key teacher moves and actions. And I think just to reiterate what you said, following the question that I asked about what did the teacher do after watching the independent practice, you indicated that she gave wait time for the scholars to get started. It wasn't long wait time, but just enough for them to have something on the paper before she went around for her AGMO. And then you stated that she asked some questions, clarifying questions. She gave feedback, whether it was critical or constructive, or whether they were on the right track. And most importantly, what I heard you say was she kept moving, right? She kept moving.
Yes.
And so that is what we are going to focus on today. We're going to stick on, this is your new action step for today. And I have some resources that I want to show you, and then we're going to get into creating some of this. Okay. So your action step is to monitor aggressively during independent practice by one, creating a monitoring pathway that is consistent and intentional.
You say consistent and intentional?
Yes.
Okay.
And two, with the teacher exemplar, pen, and tracking document in hand, use a consistent norming code to mark scholar papers. So you were hitting on all of the pieces that I wanted you to hit on in observing the lesson, which is why I think you smiled a little bit, because I'm like, with that first step, which you kind of were aware of that too. It's hard to kind of get around to all of your scholars, but we wanted that intentional piece, and I'm going to show you how to do that. That intentional piece is key, right? And so let me pull up a resource that I've been using. So I think you do really good about creating exemplars. Like even when I work with your team in WDMs, I'm always looking at your exemplar first. After I've created my exemplar, just because it's very thorough. But in math, I'm talking about math right now.
Right.
But even in ELA, the ones that I've seen have been very thorough enough to know exactly what you expect your scholars to be able to do, or the answers that you're wanting your scholars to give. So that I didn't need to give you that action step or that piece of action step, because you do that really well.
But you want me to have that in hand?
Yes.
When I'm monitoring, when I'm walking and pacing
If
around.
you are, I think for practice, let's just get in the habit of having that.
I didn't know that.
Just that one piece on your clipboard, because you do really well about having a clipboard in hand too. I think sometimes you guys carry your full lesson plan around, and your exemplar is typically in there anyway.
Right.
And so when you're about to aggressively monitor, just referencing back to that. Now, she didn't have an exemplar in hand, if you noticed.
Yeah, I did notice that.
But she, either that could have been for a number of reasons. I know she's done the work based on the moves that she did in the clip. She teaches this block at least 3 times, because she mentioned 2 other cohorts that she had taught it to already earlier in the day. So that means that she's probably at this point knowing exactly what she's looking for, which is why she made that comment, like, this is what they've been lacking the entire day. And she probably has that memorized in her head by now, the exact answer that she's looking for. So for her case, I'm assuming, it's an assumption, but that's why I would think that she wouldn't have her. As a good practice, just have it, just so that you can reference back to it if needed. Okay. It's just there. the intentional pathway. And so the reason why it's extremely important to have a pathway already created is, one, you want to hit your fast finishers early, right? Dominique, you want to hit him first because you know that he's typically, you know that if you start with him, if you hit all of your high scholars or fast finishers first, you can either, one, if they have it, then okay, let me continue to move on. If they don't have it, we might as well stop and let me address it or reteach it now in the moment, because I know that there's no way that no one else has it if my high students don't have it. And so I want to say often that is the fast finisher is often your highest scholars. It may not be aware of that, because you also know we have fast finishers who finish early and are not necessarily, they just want to finish early. So keep that in mind too.
Yes, I will.
This is hard, and the reason why this is hard is because we innately want to go to our kids that struggle the most, right?
Yes.
Because we know that they need more support. And so it's going to be an adjustment, because you're typically not thinking, oh, I need to go to a scholar and work with a scholar I need to check in with them first, because you know they have it, so why would I not? So that's going to be the first adjustment that you're going to have to make. This guarantees that you actually have work to check as soon as you begin circulating as well. If I go to my struggling scholar, most likely they're not going to have as much on their paper as the other scholars are going to have. This also gives your most emerging scholars additional time to progress through their work by the time you get to them. It also teaches them to embrace that struggle and work independently rather than expecting immediate intervention from the teacher, which is key, especially as they're transitioning to third grade. If the first 3/4 of your top scholars have the same error, chances are, like I said, the rest of the room is going to have that same error as well. And so this is an example of what this might look like in your classroom. This is the way she has strategically placed her students this way. If your students are not placed in this way, then, because as primary teachers, as a former primary teacher, we used to pair, I used to pair a higher student by a lower student. And so you may find yourself you just have to, this teacher just happened to have them in order, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is the way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. You see how she kind of, or he jumps around. Yours might look totally different. By the layout of your classroom, you just know that your pathway, you want to make sure you hit your highest scholars first. Okay? Do you have any question about that piece?
No, is there like a format here that I will have that I needed?
No.
Okay.
This was just a resource that I found that was already built in.
Okay.
So you really can, however you want to do it. If you want to draw it out, if you want to build into a document, just so that you have a seating chart. If you haven't ever included a seating chart in your sub plans, for instance, you could use that and just manipulate it to how you needed it to. And then the next piece I wanted to show you was the codes, okay? So this is your code, and I think you have already named that you didn't get around to all of your students, right?
Right. And I only did one lap.
Right.
Which I felt like I needed to do at least one more.
Yeah. Let's talk about what this lap was.
So this was that they were able to independently, they were able to recall 3 things that the author was trying to teach.
Okay.
So that if they could find that within the art, this was the second article called The Titanic. If they were able to find that, then they would get if they got all 3, they would get a check plus. So I kind of like.
So you use a check plus, check minus, but your criteria of success doesn't necessarily match this all the time. Because this time it was going to be, if I'm hearing you correctly, a check plus would have been all 3 pieces of evidence. A check would have been 2 or 1.
Yeah, or they got, or something like that. Yeah, or and if they, just 1.
Okay. Then a check minus would have been no clear understanding of
how to find.
Okay. So yes. So what this shows is more of a established naming code, right? Okay. So this teacher has one for English language arts codes and then for math, science, and history, right? This is a model. Look, when I looked at this, I'm like, this is more of a secondary or intermediate model because a check is correct, a 0 is incorrect, and a line means that you're missing evidence of some sort. But if you look up here in the English language arts codes, they kind of have built their codes around race.
Okay, yeah.
And I remember talking to Mr. Ron Hill about race and how his second grade team, which I don't know, are you guys using race?
I don't know if we do it as a team, but I've been exposed to it, so we use it.
And so I'm okay with this, but I think it's a good baseline, and I think it needs to be developed a little bit more by being more. So that your scholar, because I understand this, right? But I want them to understand it. I want the scholars to understand what the criteria are for success at the start of the lesson. And that is not going to change. If we're in ELA, if we're in reading, this is what these codes mean, right? Because this could look different for another task that you give them later on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Meaning, like, this could be the codes that I just named, what a check plus, check, and check minus means is different from what you have listed here, right? So we want to make sure that the codes are consistent so that they have a clear understanding of, okay, this is what, moving forward, this is what Miss Treeter means if I have a check plus on my paper, if I have a check on my paper.
Okay. So it may not be exactly like this.
No.
But
this is just an example.
This is more in depth.
And I can find some more, if you want me to, I can find some more primary type of codes that we use for aggressive monitoring. But I just wanted to give you a baseline. Okay?
Yeah, that might help. And I don't mind going around and asking like what others do too.
What other teachers do too, to kind of. So we were going to build in some practice time, but I want to be mindful of your prep. Okay. I was going to have you actually create your pathway with me, but we will table that. If you can create your pathway for me and just give me a copy of it in my mailbox to make sure that we are setting norms and timelines. When do you think you could have that to me? Let me start there. When do you think you could have the pathway to me?
By Wednesday?
By Wednesday?
Is that good?
That's perfect for me. That will give me enough time to find a few more examples of codes for you. And then I'll have that to you by Wednesday. So I'll give myself a deadline.
Okay.
And then from there, I'm going to pop back into your classroom before spring break so that I can see how it's going. I would love to see this incorporated into an upcoming lesson as far as you being able to set the criteria of success is what we'll call it for your scholars so that they have an idea, okay, moving forward, this is what the codes in this classroom will look like. And then I would love to see you try this pathway